A Bullet in the Ballet by Caryl Brahms and S.J. Simon. Abridged and read by David Rumelle. A Bullet in the Ballet. Episode 2. On the opening night of its London season, the ballet Stroganoff is stunned by the murder of its leading dancer, shot in the title role of Petrushka.
It was perhaps as well that Paluk could not remain alive to read his own obituaries, for he would not have been at all pleased with the manner in which they were framed. They merely dragged up the matter of his 3 unsuccessful marriages, and the 7 times he'd walked out on Anne crawled back to Stroganoff. Not an entrechat, not a cabriole, not so much as one of his 6 magnificent turns mentioned. But even though the world at large did not seem unduly perturbed by a chattering loss, up in the classrooms at the Collodium Theatre, everybody was in tears. 26 dancers in the corps de ballet, 15 mothers, 3 fathers, 12 small-part dancers, and 6 ballerinas were all refusing to lend each other handkerchiefs. There was Stroganoff edging away from Stanley, and finally there was Arienskaya, ex-ballerina to the Mariinsky Theatre, ex-mistress to Anton Paluk, director of classes to the Stroganoff Ballet, and sole dictator to her husband, P. Putik. Shriveled but arrogant, she's sitting upright in a gilded chair, from good-humoured ladies, presiding over the mourners. One hand is using Stanley's handkerchief to wipe her eyes, the other eluding the sympathetic pats her husband is endeavouring to administer. "Laissez-moi," she says. "I am inconsolable. I want nothing. Go and fetch my bag that in my distress I left on Stroganoff's table, my cigarettes which are in my dressing room, and my shawl which I left at home. I am freezing." P. Putik, premier dancer to the Mariinsky Theatre, and principal walker-on to the Stroganoff company, ambled happily off. "Her shawl," he mumbled, "her cigarettes, and something else which I will remember later." Pavel Bunia bumped into him in the doorway. Pavel presented a languid cheek to Stroganoff and the backing Stanley, and sauntered towards Arienskaya. "Poor Anton," he sighed. "Terrible, I assure you. I did not shut my eyes all night. Little did I think when we come to London that it should be I who would dance Petrushka." Half a dozen heads jerked up sharply at this statement, among them Kasia Raniewski, a newcomer to the company who had hoped vaguely that he might secure this distinction. Noticing his depression, Arienskaya beckoned him over, but not, as it transpired, to offer consolation. "Where," she asked, "is Rubinska this morning? She's a bad girl. Last night in Petrushka she was 4 beats late with her entrance, and for why?" I'm afraid," said Kasia, "that was my fault." "Of course it is your fault. That is what I'm saying." "Your whisper in the wings," interposed Stroganoff, "and poof, she is late. Do not do it no more." He dismissed the man airily and bent over Arienskaya. "Ma belle," he said, "presently there comes a young man who has never seen Petrushka, but a good boy quand même. He is from the police and will catch our assassin. This man will surely ask you many questions." "The police, they always ask questions," nodded Arienskaya. "But this time I am not afraid. My passport, it is perfect." "Excuse me," interposed Stanley, "but I think you've got the wrong idea of the sort of questions the police are going to ask. They'll be looking for a motive. That means they want to probe into Anton's life, his friends, his enemies, his affairs." "But of course," agreed Arienskaya. "Me, I will tell him how cleverly I seduced Anton 10 years ago." "Poof," said Stroganoff, "they will not be interested." "Mais c'est très intéressant," protested Arienskaya. "Paluk, he did not want. He mauvais sujet. Havelock Ellis, he have chapter about it." Stanley blushed. He could never get quite accustomed to these franknesses, though he came up against them on an average 50 times a day. "It is time to start the class," agreed Arienskaya. She rose and clapped her hands imperiously. The pianist struck a weary chord, and scuffling started. That Paluk was dead was no longer important. Meanwhile, Quill at his breakfast table gazed with revulsion at a plate of cold cereals, and wondered why he, who faced cutthroats, blackmailers, and conmen unflinchingly, should lack the courage to give in the notice to his landlady, Miss Treacle. In front of him was spread the accumulated data of the crime. acquired with superhuman pertinacity the previous evening. Addresses of the company. Though everybody knew with whom everybody else was living, they were all very vague as to where they were doing it. Altogether an exhausting evening. Still, he had made some progress. The full medical report would be in his hand shortly, and he was due to witness the reconstruction of the last act this morning. After that, it ought to be a straightforward matter of docketing the data and sifting the evidence. Grimly, he rose to his feet, buckled on his raincoat, and strode out. Upstairs in the classroom at the Collodium Theatre, feeling uncommonly clumsy in the face of so much precarious balance, Quill edged his way over to Stroganoff and tapped him on the shoulder. "Go there," said Stroganoff absently. He thought it was Stanley. But Arienskaya, catching sight of the good-looking young man, stopped the class and came towards him with a slow but very determined gait. "I am Arienskaya," she announced. "Meet me." "Ah," beamed Stroganoff, "it is a nice young man who has never seen Petrushka. You have slept well, no?" "I did not close an eye," declared Arienskaya. "First there was poor Anton, and then there was my husband who would keep on talking. Ah, here he comes, the villain," she added, as Perchik came hurrying in with a cushion, a small valise, and a footstool. "And this you bring, what is it? I did not ask for these things. No, we go to my dressing room while my husband takes the class. He's a good teacher," smiled Arienskaya, as she propelled Quill through the door. "Not as good as me, but still good." She threw open the door of her room. "Now, we have a nice little chat while Stroganoff he go down and prepare the stage." Alone with Arienskaya, Quill began to feel more normal. He was about to interrogate a witness, which, as every reader of detection is aware, is the groundworks of any murder case. The first rule was to put the witness at ease, but it was early evident that this would not be necessary. Already Arienskaya was seated in a chair and was waving him to another. "Now," she said comfortably, "you tell me all about it." Quill remembered the second rule. Let the witness talk. This witness needed very little encouragement. "Paluk, he lived with Pavel. It is disgusting that he still like men after I go to all that trouble to seduce him." Quill pricked up his ears. "You were in love with him?" "Me," said the astonished Arienskaya. "But no, we sleep a little, that is all. Me, I only love my husband." "And did your husband know of this, liaison?" "But of course he know. Everybody know. My husband tell me himself it would be no good. But I do not listen." But perhaps this husband was not as complacent as Arienskaya made him out. Had he stumbled on a possible motive? "And when did this happen?" "Oh, it is now 10 years. You must understand I am now old. I do not have many lovers now. But at your age it was different." Rule 5. Keep the witness to the point. "Where," he asked firmly, "were you at the time of the murder?" "In my box," said Arienskaya, "with Stroganoff. No, Stroganoff leave before the end." "Then you saw Paluk die?" "Yes, and for once he died beautifully, right in the middle of the beat." "Did his death strike you in any way unusual?" "But very unusual. As a rule, Paluk he died 2 beats too late. But me, I thought it was a fluke. It was only afterwards I realized that someone shoot him in good time." "Who told you?" Arienskaya reflected. "It was Rubinska, I think. Yes, I'm sure. She was crying when I went to her room to tell her how bad she danced. I asked her what is the matter. Oh, I am soft-hearted, moi. And she told me that Paluk was shot." "And how did she know?" Arienskaya shrugged. "Maybe she shoot him. Who knows?" "Would she have any reason to shoot him?" "We Russians, we do not need a reason," declared Arienskaya. "She loved him, that is plenty, and Paluk, he no longer love her. That is more than too much." Quill could almost feel the textbook nodding approvingly. He had left her for another woman. "Pas exactement, but he left her." Quill felt he had stood all he could digest from this witness for the moment, and was relieved when Stanley's eager face popped round the door to announce that the stage was ready. Out in the house, the stalls, under their dust covers, stretched wearily across the auditorium like the dead waves of a white sea. It's almost a shock in this vast wilderness to see Stroganoff's amiable dome, bald and shining. Beside him, Arienskaya is nothing more than a loud voice in a twisted shadow. Quill and the fascinated Sergeant Banner, the latter firmly planted in the front row, complete the effect. The curtain has just gone up on the noise and bustle of the last act of Petrushka, the ballet of 3 puppets. Petrushka, a traditional Russian clown, the Moor, his richly attired rival, and the doll for whose affections they compete. These are the tragic triangle that an old showman, the charlatan, he is coldly called on the programme, has, by means of his enchantments, brought to life. Quill had the strained expression of a man who is trying to absorb everything at once. This was awful. Not a square inch of the stage had had its gyrating occupant, and none of them seemed to gyrate in one place for long. From the balconies, gypsies waved and mouthed, handsome Russian women cavorted gaily, the crowd pushed and jostled. Snow began to fall, and the curtains of the puppet booth running almost the length of the stage were agitated, as though by a hurricane. From them burst the affrighted doll, the Moor, scimitar raised on high, and a wizened Petrushka, ambling furiously around the stage like a bumblebee in a hurry. "Mon Dieu!" Arienska's shrill voice almost drowned the miscellaneous noises in the orchestra. "It is my husband! Why?" Stroganoff, holding her forcibly in her seat with one hand, explained with the other that this was at Pachik's own request. "The old one is always asking me to allow him to dance Petrushka, and today it costs nothing to give him that pleasure." Meanwhile, the Moor, unable to postpone catching this rather laggard Petrushka any longer, had killed him several bars too early, and had now advanced to the footlights to reason with the conductor. "You," he said, "you never look at the stage, and if you did it would make no difference." "You," retorted the conductor, "cannot count 9 in the bar when you hear them." The Moor burst into what sounded to Quill like Arabic. Actually, it was Russian. The conductor, an unsubtle soul, called the Moor a bastard. Like a billiard ball, Stroganoff shot from his seat, gathered momentum down the gangway, and grasped the conductor urgently by his hair. "Through you I was estranged from poor Anton, and now you wish to lose me, my Pavel? You watch your stage, and you take your time from them, you hear? And afterwards you are sacked. I have a man here who has never seen Petrushka, and this is the effect you show him." And meanwhile, the dead Petrushka had risen unseen behind the crowd that clustered in front of him, and was being helped up a ladder backstage that led to the top of the booth, where his spirit was due to appear. The ballet went on. To a quieter rhythm, the stage was cleared of its multitudes, till there was only the magician dragging the lifeless effigy of the puppet Petrushka across the sawdust. The squeal of the oboe shot through the air, mouthing Petrushka's death agony for him. Immediately, Putik bobbed up on the roof, waved his arm furiously at Quill, twisted his head frantically in all directions, and finally collapsed in mock death. "Excuse me," Quill asked Stroganoff, "but did Paluk move his head like that in the part?" "Not like that," said Stroganoff, shocked. "Much better." This was disappointing, as a twisted head meant that it would be difficult to fix the direction from which the shot had been fired with any certainty. Nevertheless, the reconstruction had served its purpose. There were not many places around the stage where the murderer could have concealed himself to fire unseen at his target. The balconies on each side of the stage were the most probable of them. They'd been crowded with performers during most of the ballet, and if one of them had elected to stay behind, he had better examine the balconies at closer quarters. As Quill expected, the ledge offered an excellent hiding place for a murderer. Crouched behind it, a person was completely concealed from the wings and stage. He tested this for himself. Detective's Handbook, Rule 27. "You are droll," said Stroganoff, amused. "In the performance, the lighting is different. Anyway, no one would want to look while Petrushka die." Quill felt inclined to agree. If the murderer had indeed selected this spot, the chances were that he had remained unobserved. Quill completed his inspection up on the roof where Petrushka had died, but beyond a few bloodstains there was nothing to learn. "Lunch?" asked Stroganoff hungrily. Quill excused himself. He was planning a quiet hour of recuperation at a neighbouring pub. He wanted a rest from Stroganoff.